So yeah, thanks Tuhon for coming out to the show. I know I've known you since I was about 17 years old, and so I wanted to make sure the first episode was with you because you're a massive influence in my life, not just as a martial artist, but as a man. And in this podcast, we're trying to show Filipino American men basically how to be better leaders, better fathers,
Mm.
better business owners, whatever. So before we continue into like discussing Atienza Kali and the martial art that you teach and that your family founded, as well as the blades that you make, which I definitely want to get into. I want to have the audience know who you are as a man. So if you could just talk about who you are, what you do, a little bit of your background, where you're from.
Okay. I mean, first of all, this is my first not podcast, but the first interview that I've done. I mean, we've done the firesides.
Mm-hmm.
I've been getting a lot of requests for like interviews, so I figured, let's give the first one to Guys in Tribe first. That way we can run a test run.
100%.
There's a bunch of things I can't say, so I just want to, this is a good test run. Now, as far as myself, where do you want me to start?
Well, how about where you're from, your background, things like that, the basic stuff. Yeah.
I was born in Brooklyn, in New York, 1972, 51 now. Eventually we moved out to Queens, went to school out there until like 1990. And then neighborhood got real bad, so we had to get out. Did the whole college thing. Almost graduated with a degree in physics, minor mathematics. Very close. Was into all that science and math. I was real good at that stuff when I was a kid. My grandfather had a bunch of degrees, like 2 in engineering and 2 in law, or something like that. So it was. Cool. I think I got some of that brain.
Yeah.
And then went to college. Did a lot of teaching since I was really young, and then eventually didn't want to be in corporate America anymore. Didn't want to be in the slave ship anymore. So. Contacted Amana Tuhon, and I have been doing this ever since I left my job. I think, when did you start? 03?
02, yeah, 02.
02, yeah. 02. So 03 is when I left my job, and that is all I've been doing since. So,
wow.
I mean, we can get into more of who I am as we talk, but
100%.
Talking here for a while, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, because like a lot, like I didn't know about that about your grandfather. That's pretty cool, And like again, I've known you for so long, but there's so much I want to learn about you and your background and stuff like that. So speaking from your childhood, as a Filipino American, and so what was that like? I mean, you spoke about this in the firesides, but what was that like growing, like from your childhood? What was one of the earliest memories that you can kind of discuss and kind of give you an insight into what it was like growing up Filipino American in that environment?
I mean, it's just like any other, especially in the 70s, like culture. It's like, the culture's different from household to school is always different. Bringing in like Tupperware's full of rice and everybody's got peanut butter jelly sandwiches and Oreos and stuff, like just that kind of thing, like little cups of this inside it. And, and then you get made fun of a little bit, and then eventually you start to learn the culture. But yeah, there was a lot of that culture, because at the home, a lot of stuff is taught at home, the way you're taught to, language, and everything is very different, especially the aggression. Like you'll see how aggressive a lot of the kids were. It doesn't matter what neighborhood it was, and then you learn that aggression eventually. And in general, when you're young Filipino, you're not, the way you're raised, it's not the way, at least back then. And then the people that I knew back then, it wasn't the same. The Americans can be, I mean, we're all Americans now, but Americans especially then can be very, just the way they talk can be very aggressive. And eventually you kind of learn that route,
Sure. When you were growing up in that environment, you mentioned kind of like, the identity of, we're all American now, but back then there was a sense that you were different. Do you have any like stories or memories of that time having to deal possibly with racism or, those struggles growing up as a kid?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it was one of the main reasons for training back then. Like, I guess every minority deals with that when they come here, and then they learn how to like conform to certain things. But yeah, I remember my dad telling me that he wanted to start a business when he was in the 70s or early 80s, where Filipinos wouldn't have accents
Mm,
because when they would do the initial calls for jobs and they had an accent, they would never get called back. Because
mm,
by the time, you're Filipino and you talked a certain way, if your English was good, then you got to the job site for the second part of the interview or the first interview or whatever.
mm,
And then they saw you were good, they would take you, because Filipinos are generally known for being good workers, right? But back then it wasn't, I remember he was saying that because they were losing opportunities for work just for the accents. So it
right.
was part of the reason why he never taught us Tagalog, because he didn't want us
Mm,
having that. And that's different now. It's pretty cool the
right.
way now Filipinos are, man. It's cool to talk Tagalog. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
we should, right? But our Tagalog, our version of Tagalog wasn't the language. Our version of the culture was the martial arts.
Right.
Right? So that's how we kept that. We didn't carry buck knives, carried belly songs, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So
100%.
that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of stuff coming up.
Right. Right. Because obviously I've known you for so long. The Filipino martial arts specifically, as through your father and Pamana Tuhon, and everyone around you it's like interwoven into your family culture. When you were a kid, what was your first training experience? I mean, growing up in an environment like that where training was not for recreation, but it really was a necessity. What
Yeah.
is your first recollection of your father training you? How old were you when that happened?
I started training when I was 5, 4 or
Mm,
5.
right.
D was 4 because D's like 2 years younger.
Hmm.
But like he catches up in a year, so like 4 or 5.
Sure.
Man, it wasn't. My dad was involved in some things, so
Mm,
him and Pamana Tuhon, like when they were real young. So Pamana Tuhon probably a teenager. My dad's like his late 20s.
hmm.
I don't know if I should be talking about this. This is why I don't like doing these interviews. But they're past
Yeah.
now. Uh,
Right.
but they've seen some things on the street,
Sure.
lots and lots of things, And my dad started to recognize that, it's just like any family. They come here to a neighborhood that's a little cheap, and
Hmm.
it's better than where he came from, because my dad grew
Hmm.
up in the slums in the Philippines, like in Manila. So it's he said the slums here are not like the slums there. It's rougher there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
He uses it like it's like heaven here, but he saw the drugs coming in and he knew it was going to change up. So he wasn't training us for like, it was, they usually train kids in martial arts confidence and self-esteem. He was, no, you guys gotta, you're not joining gangs. You guys gotta learn how to fight. So
Hmm.
he had a lot of experience at that point for like street stuff. There's a lot of civilian stuff. If you're not law enforcement, military, it's always street work, right?
Hmm.
So it was very militant, to a point
Hmm.
that we didn't like it. I remember not
Hmm.
liking it very young.
Hmm.
Like if we acted weak, go wash the dishes with your mom. Like he would do a lot of things. Like don't flinch. Like you put bugs on us, and your kid like put spiders on you. Don't be scared. Relax. I mean, like I learned. Uh, if you just let him do it and just relax, he'll not do it. He'll stop doing it.
Hmm.
And I figured that out. Right now, that would be child abuse, I guess. But
Hmm.
um, that's what makes you calm when someone's trying to put the blade to you and it just misses.
Hmm.
That's the training that does. And I was 5 years old. Me and my brothers are all like that.
Hmm.
To a point, by the time we were teenagers, we were very comfortable like guys trying to stab us.
Hmm.
It was not anything, because most guys don't know what they're doing on the street anyway. You know what I mean? The hardest guy to get stabbed by was my dad.
Hmm.
But everything was real. I remember everything wasn't. It was very militant, stand at attention, but push up.
Right.
So I wouldn't recommend doing that now. I don't think that's necessary. But my dad was in his 20s.
Hmm.
Like 20s, man, you're rough. You're rough in your 20s, especially
Right.
where he came from and who he was hanging around with. So he was just
Hmm.
trying to make his son strong for the neighborhood that he couldn't
Hmm.
afford to get out of yet. And he was right.
Hmm.
He was really
Hmm.
right.
Right.
By the time we 12, 13, I saw people get stabbed, shot, and it kept us calm, that training. You know what I mean?
Right. 100%. That's really cool. So like yeah, I know you told me these stories before, and again, some of these are on the fireside. When you were a child, let's say around 8 years old, what was a common training session? You mentioned push-ups and stuff like that, but what was the I guess the overall environment like? Was there kids outside of your family that were training? Was it all just the brothers training?
No, yeah,
Describe for
no.
me a day when you were like 8 or 9 years old, what that was like.
All right, first you'd have to
Training
find
session.
us, because
Yeah.
every time it was time to train, we were running. We
Okay.
hated
Yeah.
it because it was torturous. You know what I mean? There was a fun side to it towards the end,
Hmm.
but in the beginning, It was, you got hurt. And if you got hurt and you fix things, all right, you messed up this deflection, do that again. There's a lot of crying, stop crying, what's the matter with you?
Right.
So your kids, your young kids. And it's crazy, but if you look at the way we train people now, it's the same formula.
Yeah.
Usually we have armor on, guys don't get hurt. Can't have a
Right.
doctor get his hands broken, right? So,
Right.
and then later on, you have a little more successes towards the end of the.
Sure.
So, your kids. So there was a lot of you're very physical. So most of us were pretty athletic. So there was you hit bags, hit pads, jumping kicks. It was the '70s, so there was a lot of karate based stuff. A lot of throwing, a lot of locking. But in the very beginning, it was take pain. That's how it was, like take pain. You know what I mean? So you have to learn how to get a hit and take it, because you're not going to be good enough to not get hit. Later on, you won't be hit anymore. No one will touch you with a blade, but by then it won't matter anymore. But in the next 10 years, you're going to have to do not let the hit affect you. Like, don't flinch. And if you get hit, none of that. Like he used to say, like, even if your head comes off, your face and your head on the ground, your face should still be gone. Like they should not even know you're hit. So that's how he saw a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? Because in real fights, once you see people react to things, you close fast and the fights are over quick, right? So he was, don't let them know. Don't let them know. So there was a lot of that training, and that stopped later. By the time we were like 15, that was already done, because we were a little hardened by that already. And there was exercise, conditioning. You hit things, and I remember in high school I had to get up before the sun came up, and you had to hit the bag with your hands and with the bat or with sticks and pipes. Do some footwork exercise and weights on your legs, and that you keep going until the sun comes up. Sure. And I would do stuff like I would check the time when the sun comes up, and I'd try like, oh man, I'm going to do it for 10, 20 minutes today. Sometimes you wake you up because you keep going.
Yeah.
We were doing everything to not train.
Yeah.
To not train. By the time we were teenagers, it was like that. Because we already saw the effects of being, by the time we're 15, 10 years in on this kind of training, and I remember other guys in other groups training, and they weren't training like that. They weren't like that. Like they would not come there. They were like, oh, we're not going over there. Maybe that's crazy. Like that. By the time I was 15, man, it was, we appreciated it by then.
Right.
And it was necessary by then. You know what I mean? Because without that training, we'd be on the corner with all the boys. In neighborhoods like that, you join the gangs to be protected. We didn't have to do that. Now, I wasn't saying we wouldn't hang out on the corners with the boys with 40 ounces. We'd do that, but we weren't with those guys. We weren't doing business with anybody on the block. Because in our neighborhood, every block had a gang. 168 had a gang. 169, crazy, man. I'm like, why don't you just guys get together and just run this whole spot?
Yeah.
But that's how they were. That's how
Check.
That's how the environment was.
Right. So, because when I can only envision at the age, because I got 3 boys of my own. Live very similar to your dad. I got 3 boys, and so I'm trying to train them. But hearing all of that, it seems that there was an urgency to be tough immediately. Like, how did that affect you, whether for good or for worse? I'm curious. Like, how did that affect you in terms of just overcoming normal childhood struggles or teenage struggles? Because at a teenage 15 years old is a kind of a weird age, because you're young and you're learning about there's all these different changes in your body and mentally and emotionally. How did that impact you and possibly fortify you for that age group to say no to the gangs and to say no to those things? Like, how did that go? How did that work in your favor?
I mean, we already knew not to be part of that. We saw guys get shot and stabbed for material stuff. You know what I mean? It's all about, it's like anything else. These are groups of people who are fighting over money and resources. Something you see countries doing that, right? We just didn't want to be involved with that. So we never got into the bling, the watches, and because those are the things. If you're not in the gangs, those are the things that got you to violence. I remember I got a leather jacket once because I wanted one so bad. Cool leather, and my dad bought it for me, and he was like, "That's going to be gone before. That's going to be gone before New Year." My birthday's in November, and it was right, man. 1911 to the face, mass attack fight, took my jacket. So those kind of things, like even now, you don't see a lot of material things with us. We don't believe in the nice houses. Everything's functional, and that's how it. We were not known for when you're young like that, especially with if you're hanging out with a Filipino social scene, And we did a lot because
Mm.
a block from our house was a nicer area, and we hung out with Filipinos and a lot of Asians from that area, and they got into fights, but they were fist fights.
Mm.
On the block, you weren't like that. You're stabbing, and eventually everybody was shooting. So it was better to hang out with these guys. They were tough. You know, when you're raised that way, you hang out with guys who tend to be the same way. They were tough. They hated the racism. These guys usually fight on a hat. You see the chink bang, they're on it, right? So, but they fist fought. You know, and it was nice because fist fighting, it's nice. You know, like you don't have to worry about anybody dying. It's like sparring. Nobody's going to die. So, that's how it affects us socially. You know what I mean? And we made sure that we hung out with these guys so we could stay out of the neighborhood as much as possible. But eventually you'd have to come home. I remember I used to have some friends who were pretty, you know, they had pretty good money. They would never drive me, you know, they're driving Cadillacs or Mercedes. And and they would never drop me off at the house. The car would get taken by the corner. You know, they drop me 2 blocks out, like make us walk. And they were right. They were right. I mean, you know, you didn't want to shoot it out on the block for your car. You know what I mean? That's crazy, you know. And that's how that training did. And now as far as hardships, nothing was hard that wasn't the block. Like I was an honor student in high school. It was a way to get away from the block. That stuff was easy. And like by the time I got to my higher levels in high school, calculus and physics, easy. Because there's no stress. Like nothing's gonna happen to you if you fail this test. You just take it again or do better on the next one. Like you're not going to the hospital for savings, you know what I mean? So that's how that everything is not living in a neighborhood like that. It's back to basics. If you make it to certain places alive, you're good.
Check.
So everything else, like all the stress, everything else is not it pales in comparison, you know?
Right. Yeah. Because because the way you described your childhood, both in the firesides and in this interview so far, you know, it's very different than the way most of us as Filipino Americans grew up. I know when I was growing up as a kid, you know, I'm a generation or two under you. This type of tough upbringing was more common in the older generations of Filipino Americans above me. And then, you know, to hear you say like, well, your perspective is obviously going to be different because of the academic. It's like, it's nothing compared to the physical violence that you're witnessing on a regular basis. And I kind of want to backtrack in regards to the training and the preparation for that violence, because I've heard so many stories about your father. You've spoken about your dad and, you know, his skill and all these things. Growing up, what was it like being his kid? Like, what was it like seeing him as your dad? I've always wanted to know that, because again, I have 3 boys of my own. And I'm kind of in this position where I'm looking at them, wondering how they're looking at me. And I'm curious, like, what was he like as a dad, not just as a martial arts teacher, but as a dad? Like, what was he like? Was it like a typical Filipino dad, or, you know, how was that? Ethan is 7. He's 7 now.
All right. I started when I was 5. I look at the kids now, like you guys, you know, I don't have kids, right? So I look at your guys' kids and I'm like, wow, I don't believe that was happening. Like 7, I was carrying a blade already. And my dad's like, don't leave home without it. You know, by the time we were 13, you putting machetes in the school bags. Like, you leaving home without this again. So, I mean, it was normal. First of all, it was normal. First of all, we enjoyed like the blade things. It was something that we were all attracted to anyway. You know, my dad was in the circle that he was in, and we would hear from Pamana Tuhon when he was young. He was a legend. You know what I mean? As far as fighting, like, never been touched on the street. You know, guys would pull knives on him. He put his knife away, fighting with his hands, fighting a lot of people. Like, we heard like a lot of all the things that people say today that are impossible. Like, I don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
Oh, you'll always get stabbed in a knife fight. And I remember I was talking to my dad once, you know, by the time I was 15, 16, pretty arrogant about the skill set. You know, you're not really losing fights, you know, giving people knives, telling you to stab, you know, take this fucking knife, stab me, you know, and then you're messing them up, you're doing your thing, right? And he would be like, I would start, I'm like the master now. And he goes, you're the master, raise your hands. He would do this. And I have stab wounds in my hands and he has none. He goes, who's the master? Like, who's the master? You know, I'm like, well, at least they're not on my body. He goes, nothing. He would do. Like, that was like a conversation with my dad, you know? And I mean, he was most of the time he was a father, you know, he loved his kids. I mean, he really wanted to be a dad. Like, his father had him, like, I think his dad was like late 50s or early 60s when he had him, you know. So he never really knew his dad. So he had his kids young.
Mm.
I think he had a bum when he was 20 or something like that. So
Right.
he was like, no, you have your kids, don't be an old guy, that kind of thing. Different now. There's a lot of people that have kids older now, but as much as he can, he wanted to hang out with his kids.
Mm.
It was the same thing. The struggle to provide was a thing. And until, they started getting higher in their positions and their jobs and the money started coming in. But a lot of love was shown during training. So there would be no hugs. You know what I mean? How's it going? Boom, he'd punch you in the stomach, like real, or he would sit there and like, I haven't seen him in a while. Like if I was in like college, he'd come and then he would hit me and I'd have to block him. He'd go, all right, the alcohol's not messing with you too much, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it was always like that. It was always like that. And when we were all together, me and my brothers were all there. And by then we had a bunch of guys who were training with us already, like the students we had. It would always end in like someone picks up a blade and there was no training blade. So we just get like, butter knives and kitchen knives. And then he would start going at it. And then it would be a full blown training session. But there was at a later age, it was no longer, because he knew that we were already teaching and everybody was doing their own thing. My younger brother, old brother were going around and sparring everybody they can find, so he knew that we were training. But then usually like Christmas, training, Thanksgiving, training. After you eat, everybody sleeps and wakes up. Somebody picks up a trainer, a knife, or wooden something, and then they start going, and that's it. So it was like play. It started out as play, and then the training kicked in. So
sure,
my brothers might have a different, you're probably going to interview them eventually. Might have a different perspective, but that's what I remember when I think of like my dad's upbringing. It was always training. It was always training. It was always all the lessons were through the blade. Life lessons through the blade. Hardships in the battle are the hardships. You learn the blade because, like in life, once you make a decision, you got to run with that decision. You know what I mean? Like just like the blade, if you make the wrong decision, you get cut, and there's no uncutting yourself.
Right.
You might die, or you might make a decision that gets somebody next to you hurt. You would just attach that always to life stuff. Because guys who made the most mistakes in life, if they live to an older age, they usually got a lot of wisdom if they learn the protocols, all that. You know what I mean? So he was really into that kind of training. So, and when I teach the same way.
Yes.
I'm always talking about blade to life, right? So, it's why we have so many 20-year guys.
Yeah.
It's why, because they're there for the blade, but the blade, they're there for the other thing.
Right.
Stuff that makes quality of life better. So my dad was in the infancy of that kind of talk. Come on to him and took that over completely. And he knew what he was doing with that stuff.
Check. Interesting. Yeah, very fast. So it seems to me from what you're telling me that your father, his love language was really training, like the way he expressed
that's
it.
What I remember.
Yeah,
because there was no like I love you, and everyone's like kiss you on the head.
Yeah.
Like all the boys are sleeping and
sure,
but there was not. Yeah, there was less of that and like that type of affection. It was affection, like I said, was more wrestling. Everybody, people are hitting each other, and I remember one time I was showing my brother a lock, and I had him on the ground locked up, and I was like, "Check this out! I got this lock, and I'm doing this lock. I'm holding him, and he's trying to get up. He can't. He goes, you know how you check if this really works?" My dad picks up something. I think it was a machete, and he starts slapping my brother with the flat. If he can't get up from that, then that lock works. And then we all laugh. Everybody goes,
right.
That's how it was, man. That's exactly how. Not different from what we do in the mountain.
Sure, 100%.
Right. People get hurt. The most violent training you'll ever see, like the stuff that we do, and everybody goes, hangs out and eats. You know what I mean? A little party afterwards. Same thing, and it's kind of like that because it's, as much as we're an organization, I try and run it like a family thing, right? As much as possible. Yeah, there's no tension. Salute me. No, I don't like that. But there needs to be like an established chain of command, right?
Yes,
that's how things run well. And
the
ranks in the chain of command have to be deserved,
100%
by skill. Yeah, from either teaching, delivery, moral fiber, or straight skill set. You know what I mean?
Check.
So that's how it was in my family. Same
Interesting.
Same exact way. Yeah.
Right. So fast forwarding now from your childhood into maybe like teenage, college years, obviously your training years you're mentioning, and you mentioned this in the Firesides on YouTube as well. the training becomes more practical. It's more necessary. You're seeing a lot of these things, violent things. And I don't want to ruin it for everybody. So anyone listening to this, watching this, go check out the YouTube Firesides, Atienza Fireside. They cover this in pretty good detail. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Go, by all means.
I'll answer the questions. Like we edited a lot of that stuff out. So there was a lot of, every time you saw a transition, you were like, man, that's crazy. So I'll try and talk about it. But,
sure.
So teen years. So by our teen years, people kind of knew us already in the area. So a lot of the kids would come in to learn how to do things, to fight, because they like that house never got robbed. Like on our block, we have 10, 12 houses. Every house in 10 years robbed 3-4 times. Never our house. I mean, we didn't have anything. There's nothing to take, and those guys will chop you up. So like even the crackheads were like, nah, that's not worth crack right there. So you would wait for guys in the house, man. It was kind of, like when you're that young, it's like the dream to like, because everything is good, everything is legal. You know what I mean? Like once they're in the house. And I remember not having alarms on the windows, or not like fortified. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a trap. We had dogs, always had dogs. Because dogs always wake up.
Right.
The only way you disarm a dog, you have to kill them, right? So, and if they're killing your dog, they're in the house. So,
right.
So we were known for that. Like when there was block parties and guys are playing the radios, and trunks are open, everybody's blasting music. We would hang out and listen. Everybody, it's the block. We've been there for a while, and they knew, man. We had machetes sticking out the ground. They knew who we were.
Right.
They're not the stick guys. They're the pipe and machete guys.
Right.
So, and we never had to join a gang. We never had the politic drama of I would join, and then they made me do something I don't want to do anymore. They're after me, and then we didn't have that. You know what I mean? So, so guys started to come to hang out with us to train, and that's how we started teaching. It wasn't because we wanted to teach. So there was guys on the block that wanted to train, and I remember we weren't charging at all. And I was like, look, we'll train you. We'll do a tribal. Like you hear a lot about like how the old elders would never charge for like to teach their skill sets. That comes from the tribal times where I'm going to teach you. But when it's time to throw down, you better stand right next to me. So that was kind of like the payment is you don't run. When we have to throw down. So that's how the teaching started. So everything had to be real, because these guys are probably going to get something was going to happen to them within the next 7 to 14 days of training. Like, hey, I got stabbed. We looked the shirt. How do I? All right, right-handed guy. Yeah. Was it this way? Yeah. Oh no, he was holding. He had you pinned up. How do you? All right, against the car. Were you leaned up on the hood? Were you on the glass? Were you on the wall? Like then you start going through all the scenarios. Like this, how you do this, how you free yourself, straighten up, this. And you start going through all of the different scenarios and how they can get clear of things like that. So next time you see him, it's like, oh, this guy tried to do it again to me, but he didn't catch me here. Now he caught me here on the arm. Right. Good. It's getting farther away from your vitals. You're doing better. That kind of thing. And most of those guys didn't hang around because eventually they were kids. So eventually the parents left the neighborhood. Once the finances were good, they were gone.
Right.
So, but there was a few of them, and if they didn't train, they'd be dead. They definitely would be dead, so. And it was a neighborhood where everybody carried a knife. Yeah, everybody. It didn't matter who you were. Everybody carried a knife. Everybody carried the big knives, small knives. Everybody carried it. Everybody carried a blade. I remember watching knife fights in my locker room in high school just to see how they did. Oh, these guys know what they're doing. That's how it's more anger and attitude and aggression than skill. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we got to catalog all of that.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's how the teaching started. So it wasn't like a curriculum. It was like, all right, you're going to be stabbed in this much time. This is how you not get stabbed. Right? Do you want to stab him back? Do you want to hit him with a tropical? Do you want to hit him with a pipe? Or do you want to use your hands?
Right.
Well, you want to use your hands. You're 125 pounds. You don't hit a bag. You don't hit mitts. It's like, let's be realistic, man. Here, put this hammer in your belt. And when they do this, just hammer them out. You know what I mean? Put this pipe on, and this is how you get through this.
Right.
And, we got good at doing that.
Yeah.
We were, no one under I'm just thinking back, like no one under our tutelage ever hit the ground. They ever, even if they were jumped by a bunch of dudes.
Sure.
They might have gotten tired.
Right.
Back then everybody was 70s, 80s.
Oh, yeah, smoking.
So a lot of guys, like, you train, and then, the fight rate, man, the heart rate goes up right away. You're cold,
right.
and most of the time they would even out with their opponent because they were tired because they smoked too much or they're drinking too much.
Right.
That kind of thing. Yeah, and fear makes everything like makes you more tired.
100%.
So,
yeah.
So that's kind of like so that's how the teaching started.
Check. And yeah, because I remember I'm sorry. In the teens. Oh yeah. So because I remember when I met you, I saw you at going back when you had your first public session at Across the Floor, a dance studio in Woodbridge. I was a junior in high school. And I remember seeing you and Tuhon D and Tuhon Bong were there, and some other people that are no longer in the system were there. But I remember watching you move, and I could really tell, like, this is the guy I'm going to train under. Like this guy is this is the teacher right here. And I remember getting back in the car with my dad, and he asked me, he's like, "Who'd you train with?" And I said, Atienza Kali. And he goes, like Edgar, like Butch Atienza. And I said, yeah. And he's like, "Oh yeah, keep training with those guys, like keep training with those guys." So I don't think my dad and your father, because again, my father was in Queens. I was born in Queens. I don't think he ever like knew your like really, but he's seen your father. He saw your father perform demos. So your father had this reputation. Now seeing you at that point of 2001, 2002 going public, I was always curious because this is one thing I wanted to ask you. And when I saw you at that time, it's like, well, this is your full-time thing, because Filipino martial arts is not a full-time job for a lot of people. It's making that transition from corporate America, where I know a lot of Filipino Americans are even now, or medical, and then going into teaching Filipino martial arts full-time. I mean, that must have been such a leap, a risk, if you will. What was that like, making that transition from corporate America to pursuing your passion, pursuing your dream, like pursuing the thing that you're doing now?
I mean, it was pretty stable in corporate America, man. It's decent money, I guess, at that time. I was like 80,000 a year, something like that, in 2003. But man, I just didn't like. It's like Christmases were coming faster every year, and shit, help is not good. Like you're coming home late. There's no working out. I want to get home and go for a 4-mile run. That's not happening, man. Right. Some Chinese food, go to sleep. We're sleeping, and then get up in the morning, do the same thing again. Sure. And I'm a good worker. I'm not the guy who I need during the weekend. Okay, I do that. I hear everybody complaining, and I hate that complaining stuff, right? And I mean, I hate it when I do it. I did when it's like, look, man, you get paid. We work half the day, man. We're getting like 80 grand a year. What are you complaining? What are you complaining about?
Right.
Easy work. And I was working in the bank. I was a server guy doing a lot of tech work, right? And I mean, it wasn't a risk. Monotone was like, you can do it. Like, this is not before. This is not the 80s and 70s where it couldn't be done. It could be done now. You know what I mean? It could be done now. And after 9/11, 2001. It was a lot easier to do because a lot of people were trying to get ready. They saw some crazy thing happen and they were trying to get ready, and whatever that meant to them. And that's how the students started coming in. And a lot of the first students, corporate America, were guys who were former street guys who are not those guys anymore. And they were in gangs when they were younger. They saw some real stuff, and they looked at the way we trained. They're like, all right, yeah, that would work. You know what I mean? Like, you see martial arts, I just grab you. I remember my dad used to do a test with a lot of guys, like a lot of guys doing drills and stuff, and they're saying they were good because they were doing a lot of drills. And he would just put a one punching glove on. It was real weird, right? Yeah. And he would just grab him by the collar and start tagging him in the face. And where's those drills now? Right. Whipping him around, keeping him off balance. And he's like, you don't have to sweep them, just run backwards, and they fall down. And you just keep punching them in the face, like, where's the drills now? Where are those drills now? Or you guys would be like, oh, I'm good at these blocks, and using the little ass, like the little, like those light ass sticks. You hit people in the head and then they break and stuff. Yeah. And they were like, and he would pick up a stick and then he would slop it as he's going to put a baseball bat in his hand. He would see and he'd bang, and they would try and block it, and they would crush, and you were like, that's what sticks look like on the street. Right. Like, you fight with those sticks. There's guys on the street, their heads are so hard they don't even feel that. Right. So I got a story about that. We'll talk about it later. How I learned about power stunts.
That might be a whole podcast by itself.
I would start using pipes and not sticks on the street.
Right. Yeah, I definitely want to get into that. Actually,
what was the question? What was I don't know.
Oh no, it's just like making that leap from the corporate world, America, to starting your own business and, all the risks that come with that. And you mentioned just now, Tuhon said you can do it, but I'm sure there was some kind of like, wow, like, can I really do it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Tuhon, he said that we can do it. And I'm one of those guys, man. And this comes from being in the neighborhood. Like you go out, like Halloween in the 80s, always like you're always training for Halloween, right? So that's machete time, right?
Yeah.
If you had guns, that's gun time, right? There's 300 boys are going to hit the street and then they're going to go wilding out, and the cops aren't going to do anything about it, So we would always train for Halloween, and as it got closer to the late 80s, it got worse and worse and worse, right? And it would be an option to go to school. So that my dad would go, it's Halloween, and like it fell on weekdays, like, you guys going to school today? And we go, yeah, and he was like, oh shit, like. Like, because it was not a mile to the school, and you could get into a whole bunch of stuff on the way there. Like up the corner from a block when I was a kid, some kid tried to hit me with a screwdriver for gang initiation. And that's where I learned how to strip blades. That's where I learned that they work well. It was screwdriver, there's no edge, and that's how you could tell like the fear in another person's eyes. Like, but stab is not. Most guys don't know how to stab. They're not trained, so they stab crazy, and a lot of things can happen on the way to that ride, on the way to that walk to the school. And I remember during those days where you knew something might happen, it would be the same thing. All right, put your blade on and walk out that door. So when it was time to go from corporate America to this life, all right, put the blade on and walk out that door.
Roger. Yeah. Roger that.
If you have skill, you'll be successful. That's what it was. It's always those little metaphors that do it, those little energetic metaphors that, you've been running this, you've been putting a blade on since you were 5 years old, 7 years old.
Right.
All right. Put it on. I still tell the guys, no, all right, put the blade on, walk out the door.
Roger that. Yeah. That's awesome.
Your skill should manage that life out past that door.
Check.
So you just go, you just do it. And if you mess up, you mess up. I mean, it wasn't really that bad. I mean,
right.
You would know in the first 6 months, a year, if you would be successful at it. And you just get a job. There's no big deal. You go back to the slave ship and crank out some money. By the time I was 29, 30 years old. So by 38, get us some blood pressure meds. Get some Lipitor. By 40.
I think that's about the time I met you. Were you in your 30s when I met you?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. You're in your 30s. I'm 38 now, so it's like. Thinking of that time frame, it's like I'm at the age you were when you went public. So, yeah.
We went public at 30 years old. I was 30 when we went public. I remember that because Tuhon brought us to this. He brought us to this place where we sparred guys every weekend for 8 weeks.
Remember, media,
yeah, man, it was awesome. We had to use these padded sticks because we didn't know them as padded sticks back then. We didn't dull machines and heavy sticks back then. So when we sparred each other, we didn't, but we fought people outside. We didn't want anyone talking about who won. You knew who won because that guy stopped fighting. So but he was like, you can't market that. You can't make money from that.
Yeah.
So you get all that stuff you're gonna have to do with this toy. And we did. Pretty cool. Like
I was part of that generation. I was at the media session, but I remember going to Tuhon's class and hearing these stories about, we got to go to Pennsylvania this week. We won't have class this week. I was like, when are they going? So
it's cool.
Yeah.
No, it was cool. And we were young and we were because corporate America, right? There's no more street stuff. Like you'd have to go every once in a while. You guys get fights on trains, and that happens in New York all the time. But there was a lot of sparring at that point, because sparring is like the thing you do when you're relaxing. Yeah. Like when we'd spar in Jamaica, when we were in Queens, it was like your friends are sparring and no one's going to get hurt. But man, you could see it's like when guys are doing the pressure testing, right? They go from sparring and pressure testing. They're like, you can see their heart drop. They start. Yeah. So when you're sparring, everybody's all frolicky and happy. Right. It was the same guys would spar, but then they'd have to go walk home. Right. From the house. There you go. And then you see them putting the blades in and you can see them getting worried. Because it's not going to be one guy. Of course. Jump on you. Right. So, because they know the guys coming out of that block at that house, it's not going to be an easy fight, So if they had a gun, they shoot at you. Back then, the guns weren't they were like those little 25s and 22s. Right. Not like now, everybody's got red dot Glocks and stuff. Yeah. And all the kids it's a different day these days,
Check.
So the like you said, the corporate America thing, it was I mean, I had backfalls, so put some money away and then but I could probably always go back to corporate America at that time and still do,
Roger.
you know, I was in corporate, I was doing that work for like 6 years. I had friends who were still there. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna do this thing. What's up? You know,
Sure.
and if I mess up, I'm gonna call you in a year, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't that much of a thing. It was more like I want this lifestyle. So no plan B, you know, that kind of thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
And what is C? Yeah, no, it definitely worked out. I'm still here. I started 2002 and I'm still here talking to you, still training with you. So it definitely worked out. And just seeing the growth is, especially from this past Call the Mountain, the 20-year anniversary was so eye-opening and so surreal to see, especially seeing all those old faces from back in the day. And speaking of people from back in the day, someone who's still with you now, Silak Diane, your wife, I don't know how you guys met, like in the story of all this craziness and your upbringing and stuff like that. And this woman, and she's been with you since I've known you, like even before that. So I'm curious, like what was your story? Like, how did you meet? And, you know, she's on this journey with you. She works alongside you in the tribe and the system, and you have a business together. So can you talk about a little bit of that, how you guys met and how like the training impacted your relationship and how it's, you know, keeping you guys going strong? Now, how long have you been married now?
What years are 23?
Wow.
We got married. I don't really count the marriage. I count when we met. So we met in 95.
Yeah.
So I was 23 at the time. I'm 51. So whatever that math is.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, part of the success of anything like this is out of the norm, right? You have you got to have a woman that's down for the ride. She's got to be 100% ride or die. She has to be. She has to be, because now luckily we make money. So it's not like we're poor doing this. No, we make money. Like she sees it. All right. But they got to be down for it, because first of all, without the energy of the female energy for guys like us, man, a lot of us we'll probably be in jail. So, I mean, realistically, because we stay calm and we stay wise and we try not to answer crazy things that happen on the street these days, because a lot of people get affected.
Right.
You know, so we and then having a female energy kind of neutralizes that hard male energy, especially us men. Pretty rough when we were young, like we were almost like animals, you know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, we met, well, there was a lot of alcohol in like early 20s. I was like a professional drinker. We don't do that anymore.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I'm an alcoholic, but I don't drink, you know, that kind of thing.
Right. And
pretty much I look back, I was straight alcoholic, right? You know, you're trying to shut off the voices. You know, when you're young and you see certain things, especially violent things, you're too immature to process that. I mean, there's guys now who are full soldiers that have a hard time processing violence. So it may not even be an age thing. And then you have friends who probably were there with you, or they've seen the same thing, you know, like my younger brother. One time I was walking down the street. So it wasn't even a fight that he was in, and kids would throw like bottles off the roof, and he saw some guy's brains pour out on the sidewalk. You know, he's 12 years old. You know, by 13, you're smoking cigarettes. By 14, you're drinking. You know, and training reversed all of that. And you can see it in our crew, right? You know, so there's no bottles of liquor never come out in our training sessions, man. It's not a rule, but it doesn't happen.
Right.
And you know, like, it's a weakness I can't afford these days, especially who I am and what I do, right? And we met. I was drunk at a party, and you know, and we used to hold parties in the medical office. So after a while, we tried not to go to other like outside parties. We just hold our own parties. So if you got into a fight, there was just your friends. You know, no one's getting stabbed or shot. Every once in a while, we'd go out. You know, we're just socializing. We were into that thing back in the day, and you know, you had friends who were DJs, and you know, all these different crews would all meet up, and then every once in a while there'd be someone said something about somebody talked to someone's girl, or you know, if you were on the street, somebody's messing with someone's money. And we were drunk one day, and I met her there. Yeah, and we hooked it pretty fast too. It was, you know, it was part of the formula for what I'm doing now. Right. To have somebody like that, because she's not like this. She's not violent. She didn't see the stuff I saw. She did eventually, you know, but like growing up, she didn't see that. So She was, she's like the calm person. Like she doesn't have the trauma. And it's important for someone like me to know someone who's like that. Because you have two people see the trauma, you just got a bunch of guys who are violent and rough.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, she's been that that supportive person since then. Like in the relationship, I'm the one who complains. She's the calm one. I'm the one who's like, oh, this has got to be. She was like, just take care of that shit. It's mad,
It sounds like me and my wife.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
like that. I mean, guys who are like guys like us, like we're always things that I've seen. You always think some things are going to happen. I'm better at that now.
Right.
There's a lot of post-traumatic stress in our heads, and it's nice to be with someone who doesn't have that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, it's very important to make sure that's done. Because right now, I get students who join the Atienza Kali, and I'm like, I'll look at them, and you just know how they are with their wives, and you'll know that I put a clock to when they're going to be gone.
Right. Check.
Yeah, that's especially when they have their first kids, first babies. We have that protocol, right? You guys have been with us like 10 years, first baby's born. I was like, all right. So, look, you got 5 years, man. 5 years to be back. I says, what if I don't make 5 years? Look, you always can be back. But it's not me who's not, you're not coming back because I'm telling you not to. You're not coming back because someone else is telling you not to. And that's cool. You just got to know that's how it is.
Right.
So, yeah, I see it all the time. Like most of the guys now, people are fairly successful now. Money is really not an issue for a lot of people. A lot of the stuff you see now is because of what happens not on the street, in the house.
Right.
Like inside the walls of the house is where the biggest battles are going on right now. So,
right.
So you tend to see that, like everybody plans on how they fight somebody. People like, I can plan with you. All right, we're going to go to this place. There's dudes out there. You're going to go out there. This is what you're going to do. You're going to be this guy. You have these weapons. You projectile. Blah, blah, blah. We could talk about how we're going to get ready for any type of violence, but nobody ever sat down with their wives and talked about how they were going to raise their kids before they had kids. Yeah. And they realize that they're in the fight and nobody's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So, and that's where a lot of that craziness comes from. Like, you wanted me to be rich. I didn't want to be rich. A rich guy. I'm like, I never wanted to be rich. And then shit like that happens. So it sucks, but it's all standard relationship stuff.
Right.
So, that's why, like, as much as possible, the person who runs something like Atienza Kali, that the house has to be as stable as possible.
Right.
And then the organization stays as stable as possible.
Roger that. Yeah, 100%.
So I learned that, and that's from Pamana Tuhon.
Check.
That's from SIOC LOT. Like, you can always tell how they're going to be with their students and how they're going to be with their wives. So that's.
And I really wanted to get into. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good.
No, I was wondering, like, because before we end this podcast, I really definitely want to go into Pamana Tuhon, and because when I think of Filipino American leadership, I think of you and Pamana Tuhon, like off the top of my head, like the way you guys have been able to run these organizations, basically do something that everyone said was impossible, and then create these massive organizations that are influencing people all over the world in a positive way. And so I kind of want to go into that and talk about Pamana Tuhon and his lessons in leadership. Because most of us as Filipino American men, we were not raised to be leaders. A lot of us would react emotionally, or we don't know what it's like to necessarily take charge of families or organizations. So, speaking of leadership, could you go into your relationship with Pamana Tuhon and the lessons of leadership that you learned from him, following his example, into your own organization?
So one of the first things that my father was part of an organization, Artists Americas, in '70s. So he ran that for a little while, and Pamana Tuhon was there. A lot of grandmasters were there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think that organization brought in like some of the Dos Pares guys and Professor B, Matt Marinas, Leo Gahe. I think Mary Precious. There was some beef, so we had some beef with each other. It's something that we had to learn to stop doing. Like no more beefs, no more like the system split bullshit. So. That's what Tuhon taught us. I'm not saying one day it wouldn't happen, but under my watch, it's probably not going to happen, right? So no splits, no. First time I knew Tuhon, I was young. I first started training. My dad brought me over to a Taekwondo school, and I went over there to train him. And my father and his father, Tatang Bo, was they were friends, and then I'm on a tour. Like he's a teenager at the time, right?
Right.
But I was like 5. He's 5. I think he was 9 years old. So I was 14 at the time, something 15, 16. I would do demos. And I hated it, man. I hated it. Demos. I'd sit there 5 years old, the wrist launch, kicking fun. I hated it every time we would do these big Filipino festivals.
Yeah.
You know, like the pulveron contests and like try and whistle the Filipino national anthem.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Like all that.
Yeah.
And during these festivals, they would do like a martial arts demo, and I would be the young guy doing the demos, and I hated it, man. I would hide, and he would find me and get up there.
Yeah.
Little did he know, like he did that anyway, right?
Yeah.
He threw me up there anyway, and I'd do that for a living. So by the time I was 15, I could teach in front of people like no problem, because of that, And then a bunch of gang guys were trying to kill me in my early teens, and he had helped me with that. And every time, this is on the job training, right? So all the mindset training is done there, like. We can get into that later. I'm not sure if I want to talk about that.
No worries. That's another interview.
Yeah. I mean, all these guys are still around. Like they might see this interview. So, but it was over a girl. Same thing. These guys tried. I'm going to go to kill you. Brought 9 guys at school, and then he helped it out. We managed to keep the violence, low, and but the training, mindset training, you get, you know what I mean, like. My dad taught it, but now my Tuhon is teaching me while it's happening. Right. And it's different. Like my dad is not the same person when he's with Kamana Tuhon. He's not my dad anymore. Like the way they're talking, the way they're looking. I'm like their student. I remember I had a big knife, like a big 13-inch knife, because that was our standard, right? And you fight a lot of guys. And I remember I was supposed to go out and talk to these boys on the corner because I was looking for somebody, right? And, before I went out, he swapped out the blade for like this little axe handle I made. Can I get my blade back? He goes, nope, you don't have to do it with that. I'm like, right. Yeah. And he was always doing stuff like that. He goes, and I remember telling him, later when I saw him when I was in my 30s, I was like, hey, remember when you swapped out that thing, that blade for that stick? He goes, yeah. I said, so you knew nothing was going to happen and I was going to be fine. And I was like, no, man, you could have got killed that day. But that's what it was.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, and I get it now because I do stuff like that now, right? So,
yeah.
Some of the training is pretty dangerous, right? And that it was that kind of training. Then we worked with him a little bit in our teams. He used to do construction, so he would demo houses and rebuild them in the hood, like South Jamaica. So that was pretty cool. Like we'd have to go, if you left all the stuff in there, all the crackheads come in and try to steal the copper piping. So we pass out a bunch of blades and we clear the house. Yeah, the house clears. Like, how did your dad teach you to clear houses? Like, let's go. And the crackheads fly out the windows in the back, go inside. There's rubbers everywhere. Like, you have to clean all that, to roll it up in the carpet, throw it out. Yeah, so it was cool training. But he knew that we were a certain way with blades already. So when he trained us, it was like when he actually trained us, it was no weapons. It was all left hands. Because he knew, like, man, we're not using our hands. Like these guys on the street, like we have the advantage, It doesn't matter how big the guy is. 300 pounds, we got weapons, and there's no advantage. We have the advantage. So it takes advantage away. And you'll talk to a lot of, if you talk to any other guys, like the other Tuhons in SAG, it was all about getting you out the comfort zone. I just wish he didn't do it on the job. Like, right. Like he just flogged me or burned me or something while we're training, but not like, oh man, we have to fight these guys. Like at any time, when guns come out and start popping, like everything changes. Yes. Like if you don't find that guy, usually we have a thing, you find the guy with the gun and then go for that guy first. I mean, now everybody's got guns, but like a lot of things can go wrong at that time when I was young. Yeah. Right. I wasn't really good at that, doing that kind of thing. And not as good as they were. Right. So they were known for, they didn't tell me this. Tuhon and my dad didn't tell me this. So it didn't come from them. But they were known for, like, when the dealers started hitting the neighborhoods, they were known for clearing those blocks out. That kind of thing. Right. I mean, so yeah, they were known for doing that. They had pretty good protocols on and there would be no guns. Right. And it would just be like 2 or 3 guys, no matter how many guys are over there. It would just be 2 or 3 guys, 4 max. And they would clear that block, and no one would come back to that block because they knew there was guys who were going to come after them that were not cops. So when we went to media, Pennsylvania, and we're doing that. Tuhon knew my dad trained us for that. So it would be me and maybe 9 of my students, me, Bong, and D, and like 10 of us, and he'd put us against 20 guys, 30 guys, and we would get clear, man. It was cool. Like, he knew who we were. Like, he was watching us the whole time, so it was kind of cool. But his training was like that mindset training through the martial art. The mindset training you gain in this martial art will be the mindset you have in life.
Roger that. Yeah. And I know that growing up, you've given me that like my whole life. Like anytime that I like the world's burning down or there's something going on in my life, I can always go to you, and you'd always bring it back to the metaphor of training, the blade. And it was something that I've not seen in any other martial art. Frankly, this is probably the only system next to Sayok that I've seen where, and I know it derives from Sayok, but it is this idea that the blade helps you overcome your battles in life, which most people don't even know how to connect life to the training. And I think that's what you do very well. So
I appreciate that. I'm working on that. That's when I can no longer move a blade. I'm trying to push that as far as possible. Right?
Yeah.
I'll be like to coach people with words later in life.
Right.
So like during COVID, right? Like we saw this battle, right? We got an enemy, and it was the same thing we do when we know we're going to go do something crazy, violent.
Roger that, yeah.
You got a real enemy, and you got a lot of people thinking different things about it.
Yeah.
Just like in a regular organization,
right?
There's an enemy, they all think different things.
Yep.
So there's the main goal: no one dies.
Check.
Second goal is no one gets permanently injured.
100%.
Same thing in battle. Make sure they're dead. If they do get hit,
make
sure they're not paralyzed for the rest of their lives. Just like and we did well.
Roger that.
Nobody died, and no one has anything wrong. Anyone directly under our thing, right? So
right.
I had family members who passed, right? So, but I'm saying inside our training tribe, our circle, we did pretty good at that, even though there was a lot of differences in belief systems.
100%.
But I see it just like that, always like that. Like there's a bunch of monsters coming after you. You got to fight them. Everybody's raw, and let's go, man. Let's do it. Like I said, let's do it. Walk out the door. Yeah.
100%. And so before we end, because there's so much I want to ask you, and we're definitely going to bring you back on here for at least 2 or 3 other episodes, but, and of course, Tuan Bong and Tuan D, who I definitely want to have on. Before we end today, I wanted to ask you a question. And so really this podcast is really for my 3 sons. It's for Ethan, Evan, and Elliot, right? And I want them to be able to look at this and see this interview and, these Pinoys that impacted our dad, like this is what they taught him. So if, my kids are here, and you have to give them any piece of advice as to being a better man, a better leader, what would you give them?
Man, I'm 51 now, and I guess it'll be different when I'm 71, right? But one of the first things guaranteed in life is you're gonna die. That's sure. Money, losing money, relationships, addictions, like those are all maybes, what, but you're definitely going to go, right? That's one of the first things, right? You will check out of here. The second thing is there will be battles. They're not, you're not going to be clean.
Check.
What we're talking about are those battles. What we're training for are those battles, not the battles with the blade. Let me tell you, the blade battles are the easiest battles, man. I mean, people trying to get you, trying to attack you, that it's the other ones that are like in the head, you know what I mean? So, we are preparing for that now. My father succumbed to battles, right? So he didn't clear his battles. So, the stress came in, the food got bad, and eventually he went from hard stuff, right? Enemy inside gets you, right? It's not the blade that gets you; it's the inside blade that gets you, right? So, what we're trying to do is train you for those battles. All right, so the advice is train, and you'll clear the battles. And you're going to try and clear with very little stabs in the hand, not in the body. You know what I mean? Right. And you have to have a crew with you, because no matter how good you are with the blade by yourself, there's a bunch of guys who are half as good as you. But when they all get together, they're going to fuck you up. So make sure you have a crew.
Roger that.
And everybody's down for the same mission. Now, all of those things I just said. Some of the hardest things to do.
100%.
Some of the hardest things to do.
100%. Well, Tuhon, Carl, thank you so much. I really respect your time. Thank you so much for taking this time to speak to me and all of us and my boys about, leadership and warrior culture and all these things. Can you tell the audience how to best find you, how to best reach you? Definitely about we may talk about your live blades in a future episode, because I know that deserves like a whole hour by itself. But how can people reach you and get to know you better?
Atienza College at Gmail.
A Gmail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people who join are word of mouth. That's how we like it, right? That's how we like it. Yeah.
Roger that.
But that's how we do that.
Sure. Instagram. Can you want to give your Instagram?
Yeah. Atienza College on Instagram, Atienza College on Facebook. We have Atienza Bladecraft now, which is we just show a little bit more content on blade making, and we're 2024. We're trying to come out a little bit more. We're 20 years now. We got an army of instructors now. Yeah. You know what I mean? We got some 20 pretty hardcore guys, like good, so, they're good with the blade, but they got the transfer, right? The teaching. Yeah.
The delivery.
Master the transfer. Yeah. The delivery. If you think you're good with the blade, transfer it to somebody else. Makes you really better, right? So, you'll find us. All right.
Tuhon, Carl, thank you so much. And guys, please follow him on Instagram at Atienza Kali, as well as Facebook at Atienza Kali as well. Tuhon, Carl, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.